You're listening to Productivity Protected, the podcast that's all about data privacy and security. We'll unpack emerging threats, hot issues in data security, and top ways to protect your data and how you work. Here's your host, Spencer Kupferman.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Productivity Protected podcast hosted by PKware. We've got a fantastic show for everybody today. Before we jump in, I'm going to introduce, we have a very special guest today. Before I jump in and introduce our special guest, of course, this is our first episode where we're having a guest. So that's exciting. We're talking today about shifting cybersecurity to protect remote work. This is a very important issue that's come up, obviously, with the pandemic and remote work, and I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before I do, I want to introduce to all of our audience and listeners out there, I want to introduce you to PKware's CTO, Jason Dobbs. Jason Dobbs boasts more than 20 years experience in software and product development. He's responsible for driving the product roadmap and execution, overseeing software development, and leading lifecycle management for PKware's entire software catalog, the PK Protect platform, and other platforms that we offer. Prior to joining PKware, Jason Dobbs held multiple leadership roles with Minneapolis-based SafeNet, most recently as managing partner of the Milwaukee office. In addition, Jason's been a vital part of several development teams, from launching software with startup Vesuvius Technologies to consulting on interactive technologies with Centair Group. Jason Dobbs is also, now this is my fun fact that I had to put in here, Dobbs, so you'll have to excuse me. And I'll refer to, just for the listeners out there, we do refer to Jason Dobbs as Dobbs. That's kind of his house name here. So we'll call him Dobbs throughout this podcast. But I had to put this in here because I'm so impressed by it. I'm so impressed by the fact that Jason Dobbs is an Eagle Scout. And I always kid him about being an Eagle Scout, but it's a tremendous accomplishment. And, certainly one of the reasons why Jason has showed so many great leadership qualities here at PKware for his development teams and just throughout our entire organization around the world. I want to mention this other point about Jason's Eagle Scout status, which I don't know that he even knows this, and I'm guaranteed that our audience has no clue about this statistic, so I'm going to give it to you. How many Eagle Scouts? I'm going to ask Dobbs. This is his first question. How many Eagle Scouts in the world are there? Go.
Oh, wow. I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to guess just shy of 1 million.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Not a bad guess. We're going to say around 2.6 million Eagle Scouts in the world. Now, the world is, of course, billions and billions of people, but there's only 2.6 million Eagle Scouts, and you're one of them. That's special. That's really special. I had to bring that up. Let me continue. When he's not leading us at PKware and software development, Jason enjoys coaching youth robotics teams in his community and is an avid curler. How many CTOs are avid curlers out there? I mean, come on. That's unbelievable. Holds a BBA in information systems from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So he's a hardcore Badger fan in all sports. And he has 6 children. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. 6 beautiful children, ages 11 to 21. The 6 children and the Eagle Scout. Between the two of those, we could end the podcast right now. I mean, that's just news in and of itself. Just what a tremendous journey that Jason Dobbs has taken. I want to welcome you today to our podcast, Productivity Protected. We're excited to have you. I'm even more excited that you're on my team, leading so many great people here at PKware. And thanks for being here. This is a lot of fun. I'm already having a blast, you could tell.
Thanks, Spencer. I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited to be the first guest on this podcast. So let's kick it off.
All right. Okay. So let's do it. No more Eagle Scout questions. I promise. No more Eagle Scout questions.
I'll field any curling question though.
Okay. Any curl. That's right. That's right. Any curling question. Unfortunately, I don't have many curling questions today. Maybe we'll do that on our next podcast with you. But let's jump into shifting cybersecurity to protect remote work. This is a very hot topic that gets a lot of headlines in the media, on TV and the press. It's a critical area, and I want to start off by asking our first question, and that is that there's no question that the pandemic's changed how we function in the workplace. It was kind of almost an overnight shift to working remotely in 2020, if you recall, Dobbs. I know I do. To now maintaining kind of a lot of us in the tech world are using this more hybrid model. Tell us a little bit, for our audience out there, how did remote working first challenge you and your team here at PKware?
Spencer, I think PKware was actually pretty prepared. We've had a distributed workforce for years. So when we had to shift remote rapidly, and if you recall, it was literally overnight. We really didn't have any technology challenges. The one thing that I noticed, though, was that those who were used to being in the office were the ones that struggled the most. And it wasn't about the technology, and it wasn't about connectivity. I mean, we all had that. But what happened is people really missed the community and the camaraderie of working in the office together. And initially we thought it was going to be a few weeks, maybe a few months at most. And here we are, nearly 2 years later, and we're still in this hybrid model. The biggest challenge, I think, for PKware was it was challenging to maintain the culture. We had a very, very strong engineering culture, and that was something that I think initially we struggled with, and that's something that we're getting better with day by day.
Well, I know, for me, being in a remote, I've been. It's just interesting. I've been in a the CEO roles that I've played. I've been remote, and I commuted to my
Right.
to the office wherever I was, and I that's no different here in Milwaukee, which I do want to mention. We are taping. We are here in the 414. Me and Jason Dobbs together here. I woke up this morning. It was a balmy -6 in Milwaukee, and it was it's a little shocking. I commute from Miami Beach, so you could appreciate the dichotomy of the weather and how shocking that is to my system. But it's healthy. It's healthy. But I think that if I could, I guess let's dig a little deeper into that. I guess what would be some of the inherent challenges that IT groups, when a business shifts remote, what are some of the challenges, not necessarily specific to PKware, but just what are some of the challenges we should consider in those that are listening today in these hybrid remote models?
It's a great question. I think, when you look at specifically what IT groups are going through, I think PKware, we were lucky. We were prepared. We already had a remote workforce. A lot of other companies weren't as lucky, especially those that were used to working in the office every day. They had a lot bigger challenges. Some of those related to the culture, some of those related to the technology. I think when you look at the technology, one of the first things that we saw was inconsistent connectivity from home. So that was something that companies had to address right out of the gate. We did see that problem, and some of our employees and some of our overseas employees, we saw that especially. And the other challenge that we saw along with that was, with all of the assets on premise, VPNs just weren't designed to handle the load that they were getting. They were designed for a few remote workers, and supporting a fully remote workforce was a big challenge. I think what you saw as a result of that is a lot of our customers started accelerating their moves to the cloud. Sometimes that move to the cloud was done with not as much planning as the IT teams would have liked. And in addition to that, I think, you would see the IT teams really spending a lot of time getting users up to speed on some of the good habits that they should have already had, but didn't, like multi-factor authentication. And a lot of companies also had to quickly roll out mobile device management, because now everybody was utilizing bring your own device. And again, that shift to happen overnight, that's an extreme challenge for already stressed IT and security teams. I think the list would just go on and on from there.
I'd have to agree with you. I feel like from PKware's perspective, we were well prepared for this shift, and I feel just the feedback I've received, from our employee base is how much they really love and appreciate this type of flexibility and the hybrid approach. At the same time, I feel like the folks who are also remote, I feel they've excelled too and done a fantastic job, and certainly the folks in your group have done that. And like you said, some of those folks, it didn't change, right? It didn't, the concept of remote, because we were very distributed. A lot of us were distributed to begin with, wasn't a shock to the system as much as it was maybe to some other businesses or tech environments in the tech ecosystem. So I feel good about that. And I think, all in all, I think it's been hard as well, because you have these, the viruses that come and go, and then the case counts that shoot up, and the infectious aspect of that gets hot at one moment, then it gets cold at another. And so it's really hard to try to bob and weave in and out of that. And I think we've done a good job just trying to maintain consistency with our hybrid approach, and create an environment that's safe for folks who want to come in, and for folks who haven't or come in less. That's been great too. And we found ways to bring them in and make sure that we're keeping them part of the community, so to speak, and keeping them engaged. I think that's, to me, has been the biggest challenge, is making sure everybody's still engaged and doesn't feel like they're out on an island. I know that you're right. That has been hard.
Right. And I think we're learning more every day. Here we are 2 years in, and I don't think we've mastered the hybrid work model. I think we've mastered it from a technology perspective. I feel we're really strong there. And I think the one thing that I've realized, I've got a lot of engineers and a lot of engineering teams, and each team has kind of their own culture, their own way of doing things, the way they interact, their cadences, the meetings. And I guess what I've learned is it's really important that the company itself has a strong culture that we're presenting, and that I'm presenting to my managers, because I have to say I have some really, really strong managers that are taking, our company values and making sure that those are present on every single one of their teams, but at the same time, respecting kind of the uniqueness of that particular team and how they want to work together, and I think a lot of our teams have actually formalized some of those working agreements to make sure that when they bring someone else on the team, that that new team member knows what to expect out of that team. So I think, we're, like I said, we're learning, but I think we're doing a pretty good job with it right now.
No, I appreciate that. And that's a great segue into this next question, Dobbs, which is, as we both referenced, I think it's fair to say that the hybrid model, at least in our sector, in the high tech community, is one that will probably be around for quite some time. I think we all agree on that. And I guess what I would ask you is, what are some of the changes that organizations should make, if they haven't done so already, to increase data protection?
Oh, yeah, another great question. There's a long list of things that companies should be doing. Some of them we already talked about, but some of the ones that we haven't, I would say it's important to continually train employees on security policies and why they're important. I think one thing that we've noticed, both here and at our customers, is most employees want to do what's right. They want to help keep company assets secure. They don't want to do anything that's going to put the company in jeopardy. So I think, you look at it from a data perspective, one of the first things you need to do is just have better asset tracking. It was really easy to keep track of everything when it was, confined to the four walls here. But, now that company assets are pretty much everywhere across the globe, that's something that IT organizations really have to have on lock. It's also important to allow individuals to bring their own device, right? So BYOD is a big thing. And for that, a lot of organizations that maybe didn't have their mobile device management figured out, they kind of had to do that very, very quickly. Yeah, specifically around data, there's a whole bunch of things that companies can do, right? First of all, access control to the data, making sure that the right users have access to the right data. Data loss prevention technologies, that's important. Master data management, so MDM and cataloging become very important so that companies really understand their data and understand who has access to that data and understand who's accessing that data. And then, of course, obviously here at PKware and with PK Protect, we're going to emphasize data protection, and that data protection can look a lot of different ways. It can be encryption, could be redaction, and it could be quarantine and even deletion of data when it's not relevant to the company anymore. I think technology can do a lot, but the problem is that data. I mean, I think when we think about data, we think about it's in a particular location, right? And the fact is that data is moving all the time. It never stands still. So you can protect access to data with access control, but what happens when someone takes that data from the cloud and moves it onto their local device, right? So that's a lot of those types of problems are the things that we really focus here within the PK Protect product. And then, of course, all these technologies, they need to work together, and in order to even get started, you gotta start with data discovery. You have to understand your data, where it is, what it's doing, and who's accessing it in as close to real time as possible.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Data is moving all the time, and you have to know where your data is before you can even begin thinking about protecting it. So I appreciate that perspective and our philosophy that, yeah, obviously that is right out of our playbook at PKware. And I guess where I'd like to go now is tell us a little bit about, Dobbs, about the policies for the actual data itself, not just the people who will be interacting with that data. So whether it's, retention policies, et cetera, can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think when we look at policies for data, there's a couple of different things to consider. First of all, it's who can access that data. And then it's what should they be able to do with that data, right? And then an organization has to look at a combination of who's accessing it and what they can do with it and decide whether or not that data should be protected. So a concrete example there is, obviously you're going to have data analysts that are going to need to make decisions or help the business make intelligent decisions. And, maybe they don't need access though to that PII that's sitting inside of the data, because all they need to do is look at the data in aggregate in order to make decisions. So when we start looking at those protection options, like I mentioned earlier, you've got encryption, you've got redaction. The one that you just brought up is retention. I think if we look at retention, what I always talk about is companies realize that data is valuable. Companies realize that data is their most valuable asset right now. And the one thing that companies need to realize, though, is that the value of that data is it's most valuable as soon as it's created, and it starts to reduce in value over time. In addition, as you're hanging on to that data, the risks actually start to increase with that data. So at a certain point, you cross an inflection point where the risks outweigh the benefits of that data. And companies need to take that into consideration. So I think a lot of companies, when they look at retention policies, they're looking at retention policies around different compliance thresholds that they have inside the organization. But companies really need to take into account that risk to value ratio overall. So, at the end of the day, what you really need to do is you need to have as much automation as possible to help identify to help make those retention decisions. Don't rely on your users to make those retention decisions, because if you're like me, you'll create a file, you grab some data from somewhere, you'll throw it into an Excel document, you'll use it for your presentation or your meeting or whatever, and then it just sits on your hard drive and it'll sit there forever. So users are not going to take action. You need something automated to enforce those retention policies.
That was a thoughtful answer. And I want to go back, if we can. You'd mentioned earlier in our discussion, you'd mentioned the cloud. It's the cloud's always the 900-pound elephant in the room. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to be in it. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody wants to transition it to it. Everybody wants to secure it, so on and so forth. I want to talk a little bit about that. I think our listeners would appreciate getting into transitioning to the cloud, from a cybersecurity perspective. The question really is as follows. In 2020 and 2021, we saw companies accelerating their transitions to the cloud. Again, that was something you had referenced earlier in our discussion. Does this move create security concerns? What are some of the things organizations need to know about their data and security before making that big leap?
That's a very, very good question. I think what we saw in the past couple of years is, companies had a lot of plans to move to the cloud, and a lot of those plans were based on financial decisions, right? Because if you move to the cloud and you use the cloud appropriately, you're moving costs from capex to opex and that kind of stuff. And what we really saw in 2020 with the pandemic is companies started moving to the cloud just so that their users could actually access the data that they needed to do their jobs. So the motivations changed a little bit, and the speed with which people were moving to the cloud changed a lot, because they needed to get that data in a place where the users could use it as fast as possible. So before moving that data to the cloud, it's important to understand the data that you're moving. And what we've seen is a lot of companies really don't understand that data. And if you're just moving data and you're not understanding what's in there, you're actually introducing more risk, because now the accessibility of that data has increased. It's outside of your four walls. So I think, data discovery can help you understand that data before you move. And that's actually probably one of the core use cases for PK Protect, as far as when companies are moving into the cloud. Once you're in the cloud, the perimeter solutions aren't as effective as they used to be, because now everybody is working from home. So it's not like you can just have a policy where, when I'm in the office, I can only access certain data in the cloud. That's been an approach historically. So now you really do have to make sure that before you get that data into the cloud, that anything that is sensitive is protected appropriately. And again, that could be through access control, that could be through encryption, that could be through redaction. And a lot of our customers are choosing redaction these days just because ease of use on redaction is a lot higher than any of those other mitigation strategies.
Sounds like you were actually plugging our own software there.
I may have.
That's great. No, I appreciate that. Here's really the last formal question I have for you. It really is, it goes like this. With all these rapidly occurring changes, and of course, more coming every day, whether, there's, more compliance, regulation, policies, laws, and legislation, CISOs and IT teams need to understand where security risks come from before they can address and solve the problem. Where do you see, this is more kind of a futuristic question, Dobbs, but where do you see the top risks coming from in the cyber world as we move in to 22? Of course, we read about this every day. We see a new horrific attack in all different types of flavors of attacks. But where do you really see here in 22? Where do you see this going?
I think the answer to that question really goes back to the whole risk versus value conversation from earlier. I think when companies are assessing risk, it's really going to be what is going to put them at the most financial risk. So, obviously, ransomware is on top of everybody's mind, but what I see is that sensitive data itself is what is going to put an organization out of compliance, with either data privacy regulations, whether that's GDPR or CCPA, and you've got more of a risk of fines or other penalties. It's just a more obvious financial risk to the organization. In addition to that, I feel like customers are starting to get very, very savvy and aware of privacy issues. So if there is any kind of a breach, brand reputation is at risk. I mean, I know I've personally stopped doing business with an organization because they've lost control over my data. And I think you're going to see more and more of that because it's in the news every day. And I think at the end of the day, the quickest way to mitigate these risks is to understand where your data lives and what the nature is of that data in each location. It's going to help the security teams determine what they need to do, what protection measures they need to put in place, and it's going to help them mitigate a lot of that risk. I mean, can I plug our product again?
I mean, if you have to.
Yeah, I mean, with PK Protect, we help our customers understand their data, wherever it is. It could be in a database, it could be in big data, it could be on a laptop, it could be on a mainframe, right? And once they understand that data, we help them choose the appropriate protections that will actually persist with that data, right? When that data moves, it's still encrypted. When that data moves, it's still redacted. So our product makes that encryption easier. And like I said earlier, though, we're seeing a lot of our customers choose redaction and masking because it's more usable and it's less disruptive to a lot of our customers' workflows.
Well, I'm excited to see this all play out here in the next 12 months. And I think as solutions like PK Protect, as you mentioned on a number of occasions, as those become more readily available, you'd like to think that there's that our ability to really address the threat landscape will continue to improve. And I know that as we continue to improve, our abilities, like I said, to really enhance the cyber hygiene of our customers and partners alike, of course, the bad actors will be more sophisticated as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. It's a thrilling market to be in, and we're right in the middle of it. As you said, we are right in the middle of protecting your data. We're exactly where we should be. From a vendor perspective, we are listening and partnering with our customers to understand their threat landscapes and how those are expanding, and then what we're doing to address those. And that's where you come in and all the great work that you and your teams have been doing here. So with that, Jason Dobbs, been awesome having you on our podcast today to talk about shifting cybersecurity to protect remote work. Appreciate your thoughtful feedback and, of course, your preparation for being our first guest. And appreciate the conversation. Look forward to having you as a repeat guest. I hope you'll join us again here. And I look forward to continuing to serve with you. Appreciate your leadership, your partnership of you and your team, and just excited to take on 22 with you and the rest of our PKware community. So thanks again for joining us today. For all of you out there listening, continue to pass this on to your friends who are in the space. Even if you're not in the space, in the cyberspace, you can get some great tidbits about what's going on in the community. We've got some great guests lined up for the remainder of the year. Next month, we're looking forward to having you tune in again to Productivity Protected. I'm Spencer Kupferman, the CEO of PKware. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Spencer. I'm honored to be your first guest, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of this podcast series. Can't wait for the next episode myself.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Productivity Protected. Learn more about how PKware protects data and workflows by visiting pkware.com, and join us next time for more insider info on protecting data wherever it lives and moves.